Geez, after all those scary games, it'll be a nice change of pace to play a kid's game. Something safe and cozy where I don't have to worry about anything upsetting happening. Yes, Nancy Drew Curse of Blackmoor Manor, developed in 2004 by Her Interactive, is a horror game. Yes, it is embarrassingly the first Nancy Drew game I ever played. Yes, I know I talk really fast. When I was in elementary school, I was actually forced to go to speech therapy in an attempt to get me to slow down my pace of speech, and it still never took. So, ask yourself, if a trained professional couldn't get me to talk slower, do you really think your comment will? As the brainworms have led me deeper and deeper into the world of point-and-click adventure games, I've grown increasingly curious about the Nancy Drew games. I know plenty of people, mostly gamer girls or gamer girl allies, who grew up playing them, but I kinda assumed they were just early 2000s shovelware. Lord knows I have my own experience playing video game tie-ins to children's book series, and those are mostly decidedly not good. But as I threw myself deeper into the genre, I learned that these are deeply respected games, and some of the purest examples of the first-person point-and-click genre that are still being made today. There's no doubt a ton of effort was put into these games. At least today, it seems highly likely that most people have fonder memories of the games than the original Nancy Drew books. Even the most recent games have that uncanny 3D rendered look that is both a little unsettling while also being deeply comforting and perfectly scratches the part of my and probably your brain that desperately desires the nostalgic embrace of wood-paneled computer rooms and tan desktop speakers. All this led me to the decision that I needed to play a Nancy Drew game. That, in fact, I needed to play all the Nancy Drew games. Will they all be videos? Only time will tell. Regardless, I hope newcomers to the series and Drew diehards alike will join me on this journey. Because the title Drew Crew is already taken, we will be known by the much more sophisticated title of We Fancy Nancy. Now I'm sure you're curious why for my first foray I chose to cover the 11th game in the series, 2004's Curse of Blackmoor Manor, and that, dear viewer, is because it looked cool. That is the criterion I'll be using going forward. That said, Blackmoor Manor, or BM, as I won't be calling it in this video, is pretty unique. It's not fair to say it was the first Nancy Drew game that really tried to be scary. I mean, just look at the cover of Ghost Dogs on Moon Lake from 2002 and tell me that isn't a Lost Goosebumps cover. Blackmoor also isn't the scariest Nancy Drew game. That would probably go to Shadow at Water's Edge, which contains multiple scenes of pure terror that must have moistened many gamer chairs in their day. No, the reason why Blackmoor is unique goes back to the books. Now, I'm hardly an expert here, but I find this whole topic super fascinating. Essentially, the publishing magnate Edward Stratemeyer, who launched the Hardy Boys series, had the same idea to make a series of children's detective novels with a female sleuth character. The idea of Nancy Drew was born. However, Stratemeyer only provided the plot outlines for the early books. In fact, he died in 1930, the same year the first books were published. Instead, the Nancy Drew books were published under the name Caroline Keene, a completely fictional person, and written by a series of ghostwriters whose anonymity certainly didn't reflect their individual writing talent, the most prolific of whom were Mildred Wirt Benson and Stratemeyer's own daughter, Harriet. The ghostwriting was a huge deal. The publishers even had a deal with the Library of Congress to keep the identities of the true writers completely secret, and many of the ghostwriters, including Mrs. Wirt Benson, weren't revealed until the 90s. Like Betty Crocker and Mavis Beacon, Caroline Keene was part of a strange 20th century phenomenon of inventing fictional women to sell your products. Nancy herself was the all-American girl sleuth from the town of River Heights, who was friends with the Hardy Boys and, depending on the book, dated a guy with a remarkably dweebish name of Ned Nickerson. Anyways, from there our story brings us to the late 90s, when the game studio Her Interactive, originally Games for Her Interactive, had the idea to make video game adaptations of the Nancy Drew book series. Her Interactive was founded with a simple but admirable goal of getting young girls into video games. Their early Nancy Drew games were based on the series Nancy Drew Files as opposed to the original Nancy Drew Mystery Stories series. The Nancy Drew Files was launched in the 80s and meant to appeal to a slightly older demographic, with a larger attention on relationships and romance, as you could guess by the bevy of handsome blonde boys on the beautifully 80s-y paintings that adorn the covers. Basically, in the Files series, Nancy was cuckolding poor Ned near constantly. Anyways, the earlier games were adaptations of this series, but by the third game, Her had begun to adapt the mainline Nancy Drew Mystery Stories books. And the fact they started with the 122nd entry in the series shows they care as much about following order as I do. Blackmoor established a trend of the games being much looser adaptations of the books that no longer share their title with each adaptation. Anyways, it's time to start up the game. Before the action begins, you can choose whether you want to play as a senior detective or junior detective. The beauty about failing in so many things in life is that I immediately knew I wasn't senior detective material and clicked junior without a care in the world. Blackmoor Manor begins with a letter from Nancy to Ned.
Greetings from jolly old England. Although right now I'm not so sure about the jolly part. That's because I'm on my way to Blackmoor Manor, where the daughter of one of our neighbors is living.
Nancy has been tasked by her neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, to figure out what's wrong with her daughter Linda, who moved to England after marrying English diplomat Hugh Penvillin. See, Linda hasn't been leaving her room, and it's Nancy's job to find out whether Linda is actually sick, unhappy with her new marriage and homesick, or if something much worse is happening. Something worse than having to move to England and marry a British person, which I'll admit is a particularly ghastly fate. Anyways, I can't be the only one who thinks it's odd that Nancy's tasked with this. Like, I get Nancy's a genius super sleuth, but isn't this like just a job for a doctor? Or even a couple milligrams of Lexapro? Anyways, Nancy arrives at the ancestral Penvillin estate, Blackmoor Manor, and doesn't have a too auspicious start to her trip.
Nancy. Who's there? Hello? There's something out there!
Where, child?
We're rescued from the monster outside by Mrs. Drake, Linda's husband's severe elderly aunt. Now that we're safe inside, we can admire the manor's design, and wow, I love how it looks. Yeah, the fidelity isn't too impressive for 2004, but the textures are insanely rich, and the design is completely maximalist, with little hints of detail and color in every corner. There's so many mysterious objects you see while walking through the house, and only some have a later purpose for a puzzle. Some rooms have a very specific, strong visual look, like the cozy library with its green lights, checkered floor, bookshelves, and paintings, with this stone statue of Mercury and early 2000s computer as the centerpiece. Or the conservatory with its sense of height and lush greenery, but with the eerily foreboding foggy woods stretching into the distance right outside. And then other rooms have way less of a specific vision, but are still visually interesting, like Nancy's room that is crammed with weird bric-a-brac and objects. Yeah, things are gothic and the whole design is haunted house adjacent, but in a way that feels incredibly warm and cozy. I think it's because, yeah, there are gothic medieval touches everywhere, like gargoyles and mounted weapons, but everything is super colorful and inviting. Anyways, as I always say, a game's longevity comes from its art design rather than its fidelity. There's plenty of games from 2004 that look better, but many of those had less than half of the design vision of Blackmoor Manor. Anyways, after our scare in the front yard, Mrs. Drake tells us to go to our room.
Oh, people are always seeing and hearing things on the moor at night, especially you Americans. Why don't you just go on up to your room?
Now, there are a few gameplay mechanics to go over. The first is that Nancy has her cell phone with her, which is a game feature that had been added in 2003's The Haunted Carousel. With the cell phone, you can call a few characters, mostly Linda's mom, Mrs. Petrov, and Nancy's boyfriend, Ned. Our client, Mrs. Petrov, gives you more context about Linda's condition when you call, and Ned is mainly a sounding board for story revelations. The phone also has a search engine that you can use to help with puzzles. Well, not really. You can't actually search on the phone freely, but instead, once Nancy finds out information, you might be able to access a webpage that explains concepts like astrology and alchemy, and even what you should feed your parrot. This function of searching with a cell phone is completely essential for solving puzzles. The other major gameplay device is the alarm clock. See, time passes in real time in Blackmoor Manor. Days pass and characters follow set cycles throughout the day. Certain characters are only available during certain time frames, and the same is true for the puzzles. So if you have a super long time to wait or missed a character's window, you can set the alarm clock to fall asleep and then wake up at the desired time. So basically, as the game progresses, Nancy's just constantly taking naps that last up to 12 hours in the middle of the day and setting her alarm for like 4 a.m. Thankfully, everyone in the house is way too predisposed to express concern. That brings us to the characters. The first that we've already met is Mrs. Drake, an old British lady of the we are not amused type.
I'm happy that you're visiting Linda, but I know how much you teenagers like your televisions and loud stereos, so I must insist that you act respectfully and civilly while you stay with us.
Mrs. Drake's brother was Hugh Penvillin's father. She loves gardening and spends most of her time in the conservatory and seems generally pretty annoyed by us. Next, there's Nigel Mukherjee, who spends all his time in the library. He's an academic working on a book about the Penvillins and frustrated by the lack of drama he's finding. You can find in his notes the fact that he's desperately searching for something to make the book a bestseller, which is also how we find out a ton of the ancestral dirt about the Penvillins.
Scandalous history?
Well, having a family member burned as a witch can hardly be considered a mark of pride, I dare say. And then there's the whole business with the Blackmoor beast.
Nigel's hilariously vain and pompous. Like, later when you sneak into his laptop, which admittedly is not a very nice thing to do, you see that his computer background is this like dark academia glamour shot of himself. There's also this funny segment where you have to type up his memoirs, and it starts with, "I was very tiny when I was born," which is just really funny to me. The game's writing is honestly quite funny and almost always on purpose, unlike some others in the genre. Anyways, then there's Jane, Linda's stepdaughter. Now, despite being by far the scariest looking character in the game, with her haunted Victorian doll / Wednesday Addams look, she's actually a pretty normal young girl.
You must be Nancy. I'm so pleased you're here. I'm Jane. I know you've come to visit my stepmom, but I'd love it if you could pop by whenever you get the chance. Oh, we'll have such fun. Let's play a game.
She's super excited for Nancy to come, but it's mainly because she has nothing really to do or any playmates, which is depressing. Sure, she's a bit bratty, but you'd be too if you lived in a giant lonely manor with just your mean aunt and your depressed stepmom for company. She takes lessons from a tutor named Ethel Bossany, which you can overhear as you walk by the door.
Oh, Ethel, do I have to learn this?
Yes, I'm afraid you do.
If I do well, can we play a game?
Yes, but only in French.
Oh.
The lessons are kind of weird though, far from well-rounded, with the vast majority of her lesson plan focusing on members of the Penvillin clan throughout history. Shouldn't she be learning like math or whatever the British version of the mitochondria is, instead of just the life stories of her inbred relatives? She's also obsessed with playing games and will make you play them with her to get more information.
I took it outside to look at the stars. But if you want it back, you'll have to play a game with me.
I knew you were going to say that.
Most of them are pretty basic, basically being variants of Go Fish, Concentration, and other simple games. They're not unpleasant to do, but definitely a bit repetitive, and you get the feeling they're just time wasters. I don't know, I probably would have liked them a lot more if I was a kid and stuck on a different puzzle. That said, they do explain it by Jane saying that she wants to be a game designer when she grows up, which I thought was a cute touch and a reference to her, the game studio's vision. There's also this parrot Lulu you find. One of the Penvillin ancestors brought him back from a trip to the Amazons, and though his design is cute, he's honestly really annoying. One gamer can only take too much squawking.
What's your name?
Lolo, 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 Lolo.
Okay, I get the point. Lulu.
Lolo, Lolo, Lolo.
His function is basically to try to scare you and give you hints when you're stuck, but he was too annoying for me to want to talk too much. Also impressively, he's voiced by the same voice actress as Nancy.
Lulu want a yummy cake?
Cake, Lolo on cake. Delicious.
Anyway, then there's Linda, the lady we're here for. She's sitting by herself in a darkened room and refuses to leave her bed. In fact, she won't even come past the canopy curtain and we can only see her silhouette. Linda is not happy we're here and speaks eerily about something she did that can't be taken back.
I'm tired all the time, my mouth is dry, my vision is blurry, but that's not important. Here's what's important, Nancy. There are some doors that should never be opened. There are some doors that hold secrets which must never be known.
Apparently her only symptoms are that her skin is dry and she's lethargic, but she also seems deeply depressed. Even when her mom visited, she refused to be seen outside her curtain and has been flying off the handle constantly. We eavesdrop on one of these blow-ups with her husband Hugh, who is stationed in Italy as part of his ambassador duties.
Stay in Italy as long as you want, then. Some kind of husband you're proving to be. It's not all in my head. Don't bother.
After we run out of dialogue options, she still stays behind the curtain, and when we try to speak to her, she doesn't respond. We just see her faintly bobbing silhouette. It's honestly incredibly eerie.
Linda? Linda? I'll be going now. How are you doing? Linda? I'll be going now.
Huh. The last person to meet is Jane's young tutor, Ethel Bossany. She seems polite enough, but incredibly cagey, especially when we ask her about Jane's odd, Penvillin-focused lesson plan.
I saw Jane's lesson schedule. That's quite an unusual list of subjects.
Yes, well, I'm sorry, but I'm in a bit of a rush. I need to go over some things with Jane.
Also, look at the romantic tension in the way she slides past us to Jane's room. I think I have a crush on this lady. Oddly enough, when we look through Nigel's notes, we find that in the 1500s, there was another person employed in the manor, with the same distinctive last name Bossany. Come to think of it, there's a lot of weird info about the Penvillins in Nigel's notes. Apparently early family members were alchemists and there was an alchemical forge built in the manor. Another member, Eleanor, was accused of being a witch during the English Civil War. After rumors spread that she turned her husband into the werewolf known as the Beast of Blackmoor, she was burned at the stake. The Gothic world of the Penvillins and their history of alchemy and black magic is incredibly enticing. Anyways, now that we've met everyone, you can either get started trying to solve the mystery or go to bed after a long day of crossing the Atlantic. Let's choose the latter option. Set your alarm for tomorrow morning, get nestled into bed, and...
What is that?
I gotta say, I wasn't expecting occult chanting at 3 in the morning on the first night, so this genuinely freaked me out. But when you get up to look around, nothing's there. Huh. Guess we should just go back to bed, alone, in a strange house, after getting woken up by what might be satanic rites. Anyways, now that we've survived the night, let's get on to the puzzles. The puzzles in this game are incredibly challenging. Like, I have no clue how a kid could be expected to solve some of these, and I'm positive child me would have gotten stuck nearly immediately. That said, as an adult, I found the puzzles very fun. Many of them have this cool astrology or alchemy bent, which lends itself to the setting. For example, a game might have you mixing potions or putting in zodiac signs in order, which is the point of using the cell phone search engine as a reference as you go along. The puzzles that were hard were usually hard in a specific way. Like, I never got stuck because I had no clue what to do, instead I got stuck because I didn't know how to solve a specific puzzle, which is much less frustrating to me than just wandering aimlessly with no clue how to progress. It always felt like if I just focused and kept trying, I could solve even the hardest puzzles. For example, there's this puzzle where you're sliding tiles with pictures on them in the doorframe of Jane's room. Inside, she has this tapestry with verses on it that contain certain words that reference images on the tiles, so you have to line the tiles up in the order they appear in the verse. This was easier said than done, and the puzzle took me many tries. However, I never got annoyed because I was confident I had the right final solution, but it took me a while to get there. It felt more like trying to solve a complicated math problem in school, and less like trying to demystify the inner logic of how a person whose brain works differently to you or I's wants you to use an old shovel you found. Also, the puzzles are a lot more logic-based than item-based, if that makes sense. I always appreciate not having to try clicking and dragging every item in my inventory one by one just to progress. That said, there is one that is specifically awful and I'm sure ended many runs, but more on that later. Also, to access certain zones, you need to solve the same puzzle over and over again, which eventually just became muscle memory, but still felt like a waste of time. Anyways, hard puzzles, but mostly hard for enjoyable reasons. There's a lot of switching back and forth between your phone and the puzzle, so I actually started physically writing down notes and solutions in a notebook, as I imagined a kid playing this in the 2000s would do, and honestly that greatly increased my enjoyment factor. Anyways, from here on out, we're just going to be covering the game's story in broad strokes, so here's probably a good spot to jump ship if you want to play the game yourself and don't want spoilers. But before you do, please subscribe. I would love to reach 10k subscribers before the end of the year. Plus, I heard that if you subscribe, your friends will finally stop saying mean things about you behind your back. Also, no pressure at all, but if you want to support me, you can follow the Buy Me a Coffee link below. Please don't if you can't afford it. It's a treat to make videos for you either way, but I'd be truly touched. Anyways, skip to the time on screen for no spoilers. The next morning, you get more info from Jane. Turns out, she's heard the Blackmoor Beast herself.
Have you seen a strange animal outside?
No, but I have heard weird noises like this, howling. But not like a dog howling, more like something human.
She also has more information about the day her stepmother got sick.
I was playing in Mommy's room when she wasn't there, and when I looked up, there was a lady, all dressed in black, putting something on Mummy's nightstand. The lady put a note on Mummy's nightstand, but I didn't read it. That's when Mummy started feeling poorly.
But it gets weirder.
The lady in black you saw in Linda's room, did she look like anyone you know?
Like I said before, I couldn't really see her face, but she was kind of dressed like the lady in the Great Hall.
Which lady?
Eleanor.
That's Eleanor Penvelin, the woman who was burned as a witch and accused of turning her husband into a werewolf. When we asked Linda about the lady in black, she says she doesn't know what we're talking about, but the way she blows up at us lets us know that we've struck on something sensitive.
Did you receive a note or something that's upset you?
I did receive something. But it's none of your concern. You can't help me, and that's that. I'm sorry.
We find a book about lycanthropy in Jane's room, and Linda's symptoms of fatigue and a dry mouth match up with those of a budding werewolf. Oddly enough, when I had these symptoms, WebMD told me the same thing. This book also mentions those that have been turned into werewolves involuntarily, which is usually the result of a curse. Hadn't Linda said something about that? We can actually call the author of the book and get her opinion about whether Linda is turning into a werewolf.
Most lycanthropes are under a great deal of stress, due perhaps to the death of a loved one, marriage, divorce, a relocation, that sort of thing.
All the signs are there, but it's not clear if the researcher thinks Linda is actually turning into a werewolf or just thinks she's turning into one. Clinical lycanthropy is a real condition after all. Anyways, the werewolf researcher can't talk much because, I don't know, she's at a furry convention or something.
No, the wolfbane isn't working either. I'm sorry, one of my patients has escaped. Can you call me back later?
But says she's available if we have any updates. All signs point to Linda turning into the Beast of Blackmoor after being cursed by Eleanor Penvelin's ghost. The more we explore the house, the more we realize just how bizarre and eccentric the Penvelins were. There's secret passageways, hidden compartments, and even this animatronic monstrosity that you can play a version of Go Fish with. One of the Penvelins, Penelope, had this built, which is all well and good, but why does it have to be right next to the front door? This thing should be collecting dust in a basement or sold off to the first British location of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza or something. Also, as I said, there's a lot of alchemists and magicians in the family, with an obsession for the stars, planets, and Greek mythology, and plenty of rumors about an alleged secret treasure the Penvelins were hoarding.
For centuries, the Penvelins have been very secretive. Some believe they're protectors of a fabulous treasure, or of some dark secret.
That said, the Penvelins' oddness comes across as much more playful than sinister. There's so much more charming and fun minigames and puzzles I won't get into, but throughout the majority of the game, I just had a very deep sense of having genuine fun, which isn't always the case, even in really good adventure games. Later, we call Hugh Penflin and get some interesting info. First is that there's a traditional legal clause that if the spouse of an heir lives in the house for less than 6 months, the Penflin house and wealth goes to the next heir, who in this case would be Mrs. Drake. We also learned that Jane was devastated when her mother, Hugh's first wife, and father got divorced. Lastly, we learned that although Hugh's dad, Jane's grandfather, didn't care much for him, he absolutely doted on Jane.
From the day she was born, my father doted on her far more than he ever doted on me. Read to her, bought her books, games. Truth be told, I was a bit jealous.
Could this at all relate to some weird chatter we overhear between Ethel and Jane during their lesson?
No, Jane. It's because Randolph believed that the proper qualities skip every generation. We talked about that, remember?
I guess.
We grill Linda some more and we finally find out about how her illness started.
One day after Hugh left for Rome, I inadvertently discovered a secret passageway. I started to explore it. And pretty soon, I found this really old-looking message etched into the wall. When I read it, I realized it was some kind of ancient curse. I tried to laugh it off, but it was kind of unnerving. So I went back to my room and found a note on my nightstand. And on it was written the exact same curse. That very night, I started to feel strange. The curse has been coming true ever since.
So now it's time to find a secret passageway. Jane knows about it too, but we have to play more games with her to get her to tell us how to access it. We finally figured out how to get into the secret passage, but it's pitch black and we need a glow stick to navigate. Jane is hoarding these, and guess what she makes us do every time we need a new one?
If you want one, you have to play a game with me. That's the rule. This is a game I bought in Arizona. You have to make as many matches as possible.
Man, she's really living up to the only child with divorced parents stereotype. Anyways, the vast majority of the rest of the game's puzzles will take place in these secret passageways. They're definitely creepy and have this dead, cold feeling to them, heightened by the green light of the glow stick, which makes us feel like we're hunting for ghosts with our boy Zach.
Was this spirit being a smartass?
But the initial scariness wears off and it becomes apparent just how much less visually interesting they are from the rest of the house. It's super easy to get lost too. Anyways, the puzzles here are pretty fun, usually quizzing you on alchemical symbols and runic alphabets and Penflin family lore. By the way, Jane has a complete family tree going back 700 years in her room, and she has a line of dialogue for each family member. Some of these are just Easter eggs to other Nancy Drew games, but man, it's so cool how much effort they put into fleshing out the lore in this game. Anyways, as we poke around, we run into Ethel, and she's not super pleased with her meddling. We get confirmation that Ethel's family has served as tutors and keepers of the family lore for generations.
Many of my ancestors were tutors of some of the Penflins, and I feel very honored to continue that tradition.
Anyways, things start to get insanely fucking weird in the manor. To get a puzzle solution, we stay up till 3 a.m. helping Nigel type up his memoirs, and as we're going back to our room, we stumble across something interesting in the Great Hall.
Toil, no fire without oil, no key without toil, no fire without oil, no key without toil, no fire without oil, no key without
What are they doing?
No fire without oil.
Oh yeah, my actions ensure that my name will endure to the end.
Looks like there's some curriculum that Ethel is leaving off the lesson plan. This basically confirms not only that on the first night it was Jane and Ethel we heard doing occult rituals to call Roblox at 3 a.m., but that there is some sort of cult or at least system of secret rituals in the Penflin family. Another scare comes not long after we're creeping around in the secret passage and get a peek into Linda's room. Dude, is she actually fucking turning into a werewolf? I really don't know what to think anymore. I just want to go home. Back to the States where the werewolves are at the mall instead of in creepy mansions. When we asked Jane about the ritual we saw her doing, she of course denies it, but she's not too convincing. Also, you have another nightmare that I found genuinely upsetting with the amateurish visual effects enhancing the nightmare quality instead of diminishing it. Now we have by far the worst part of the game, navigating the rotating rooms under the manor. Each room is marked by a planetary symbol, but it's so unclear at first what's causing the rooms to move and in what direction you're moving in, and if you get it wrong, you fall down a chute and die. Like, you legit die.
The floor's buckling!
I know I talked about my preconceived notions of the Nancy Drew games, but even while playing, I didn't think dying gruesomely in a way that would probably lead to our corpse never even being found until society collapses and the sun explodes was an option. This part absolutely fucking sucks, and I probably wasted almost an hour of my 9-hour playthrough on it. You eventually figure out an easier way, but you have to navigate this puzzle over and over, and if you make a mistake, you have to waste so much time fixing it. Anyways, thankfully, it's worth the headache, as at the bottom of the house is a hidden sanctum with an alchemical forge. Here, lots becomes clear. A Penvillan ancestor, Albert, was obsessed with alchemical experiments, but was scared of the attention he might get if others realized what he was doing. But he also didn't want his discoveries to stop after his death. He also wanted to guard the family's treasure, which isn't a rumor, it really exists. So a tradition began where every other generation would pass on the Penvillan secret through being initiated into the family's secret rites. The Penvillan mystery cult survived as late as Jane's grandfather Alan. Now we know why Jane's grandfather doted on her so much, as well as why so much attention is being paid to her through her lesson. She's being groomed to be the next initiate, with Ethel being a member of the family meant to educate the next generation. It's all a lot less sinister than it initially seemed. Eleanor Penvillan was never a witch, just a woman who just refused to live according to the standards of her time and lost her life because of it. Now, we decided to get the alchemy forge working by activating each of the 4 elements to start it up and opening each of the columns in the main hall with a Roman god on it. Each initiate during their life added another level of security to protect the family's treasure, each designing a puzzle somewhere in the manor. You find a notebook where each initiate describes their puzzle and provides hints at how to solve it. The initiate's notes are actually surprisingly touching. It's also really cool seeing the effort her went into to making each of these initiates seem fleshed out. They all have their own interests and personalities, and often their puzzles directly relate to these. I caught myself wanting to learn more about each of them. Anyways, you likely have done some of the puzzles up to this point, but now we conveniently have basically a checklist of the puzzles left. More hints are found in a wordless book in Jane's room called the Mutus Liber, which features esoteric drawings, which we now know are additional hints for the puzzles. It's all a very impressive and cool way providing information to the player while still tasking them to use their creativity and imagination. But none of this answers what's going on with Linda and what the Beast of Blackmoor is. None of the stuff we find in the forge room gives us any information either. If someone is responsible for the mystery, basically everyone, Hugh, Mrs. Drake, Nigel, Ethel, maybe even Linda, has a motive, besides poor, lonely, bossy Jane. Anyways, now we can really lock in and solve each of the initiate's puzzles, which is quite fun and definitely worth doing on your own eventually. In the meantime, Jane gets a threatening note slipped under her door. We're officially out of her good graces.
I mean, none of these weird things started happening until you came to Blackmoor. How do I know it's not you who's behind all this?
I think you can trust me.
I think not.
Jane won't talk to us anymore, and it's not long before we get a scary note of our own, complete with a wolf's tooth. Mrs. Drake is up to some weird shit too. Also, the house's resident baddie gets even more pissed at us.
I will not interfere as long as I am prohibited from doing so, but know that the instant I receive the word, you will no longer be welcomed in Blackmoor. Good day.
Things are all coming to a head at once. Anyways, after obtaining all necessary steps to light the forge, we now have to forge a key using hints from the ancestors' portraits and coat of arms in the Great Hall. This puzzle is by far the most fun for me, trying to figure out who was who in the portraits and finding specific symbols in their coats of arms. After spending so much time in the Great Hall, it feels like the natural conclusion to the overarching mystery. Finally, we're ready to unlock the secret chamber in the forge room.
Whatever you just found, it's mine. I'm the Penvillan, not you. Besides, I would have found it before you did if I didn't have to sit there all day learning all that other silly rubbish. What is that?
Not only is Jane behind the mystery, but the Penvillan treasure is just a meteorite.
600 years of secrets, and mystery, and puzzles, all because of a stupid rock? No way. There must be something under it.
She grabs for it, and a trap triggers.
Help! Nancy, help me! It's pitch black in here. I can't see anything. Get me out of here, please! I'm sorry I was mean to you before. I'm sorry for everything.
Jane finally fesses up.
It's my fault Linda's sick. I mean, she's not really sick. I just made her think she is. I left that curse in her room and gave her allergy pills and put her medicine in a moisturizer.
You made her think that she's changing into the Beast of Blackmoor, didn't you?
She was trying to get Linda to believe the curse so she'd flee Blackmoor in the hopes that her parents would get back together. All the business with the werewolf and curse were her doing. We saved her using a giant statue from a very unfun minigame earlier.
Thank you.
So everything was resolved. Linda recovers, Hugh comes home, Jane apologizes, and they all try their best to be a happy family. We learn that Hugh was actually newly interested in the Penvillin history and rituals and has been taking lessons from Ethel. Damn, Nancy really did just turn up and ruin an ancient tradition that survived the Protestant Reformation, the English Civil War, and the Black Plague. The ending is a bit disappointing, but I have to say, at least I wasn't expecting it. Turns out there's no magic or werewolf, just a story about the psychological scars divorce leaves on a young child. It's honestly profound in a really depressing way. Even across the Atlantic, in the Gothic splendor of an English country manor, people's problems are as similar and quotidian and depressing. Jane is being initiated into a Gothic world of magic, alchemy, and occult rituals, but still the thing taking up her brain power is that concern that kids of divorced parents the world over have. Will Mommy and Daddy ever get back together?
I just wanted to go away. I just wanted to be Daddy and me and Mommy, my real Mommy. Please don't make me talk anymore, Nancy.
Also, it's kind of fucked up that we just ruined her entire family birthright scavenger hunt that's literally been designed for her for centuries before she even got the chance to do it.
Dear Ned, well, there is a beast of Blackmoor. Jane.
Maybe you're the real monster, Nancy. I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed that werewolf wasn't real. This is absolutely a me problem, as I'm pretty sure monsters don't exist in the world of Nancy Drew, but in my defense, I watched Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island like 20 times as a kid, and it convinced me that the monsters were actually real this whole time trope was going to be used across media way more than it really was. I held out hope that the run-in with the monster at the very beginning was unexplained and could be a loose end to making the werewolf theory possible, but no, turns out the whole thing was explained to be Jane in a cutscene I just happened to never get. I mentioned the next game was based on the book The Bluebeard Room, so let's talk about the game's influences. We have two distinct influences, a 1965 horror movie and the book that was meant to be an adaptation of, The Bluebeard Room, ghostwritten by James Duncan Lawrence. Let's start with the movie. Our movie is called Die Monster Die, which despite being an English movie is a translation from German meaning the monster, the. The film is an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. An adaptation as loose as watching a Pokemon stream is an adaptation of worshipping in a cave at the stone altar of the moon goddess. In it, a 1960s American Chad named Steve travels to England to meet his girlfriend at her ancestral estate. However, everyone in town hates the family. His future father-in-law, played by Boris Karloff, is super menacing, and his future mother-in-law begs him to leave and rescue her daughter while hiding behind a veiled canopy bed. We learn that a strange, corrupting sickness has been menacing the house and warping and mutating its inhabitants. Things just escalate from there. The movie is not great. It's definitely way better than the type of movie they'd watch on Mystery Science Theater, but it still oddly reminded me of one. For a movie that's only an hour 18 and features such a cool setting, it's extremely boring. There is one really bizarre and cool scene with some insane puppets and practical effects, but I don't really think it makes the whole movie worth watching. Either way, the movie certainly had a concrete influence on the game. Certain distinct character names from the movie are recycled for Penvillin relatives. Also, all the strange events of Die Monster Die are caused by a mutating radioactive meteorite, likely giving the developers the idea for the meteorite being the Penvillin's treasure, but the biggest influence is definitely the appearance of the mom being mirrored in Linda's. Both of them are bedridden and never come out from the obfuscating veil of their canopy bed. The effect is eerie in the movie, but perfected in the game. I get the feeling that the developers watched the movie and wanted to reuse elements of the setting in Blackmoor, but especially the very striking dynamic of speaking to a character that is only half seen behind a veil. Now let's talk about the book, The Bluebeard Room, ghostwritten by James Duncan Lawrence. Now, this book is extremely weird. It's the first Nancy Drew book I've ever read, but I don't think they're normally like this. Anyways, I hope they're not. The writing is the typical 80s, 90s YA prose that's heavy on dialogue and that you can just speed through it in an evening, but there were so many weird details. Like, the writer is constantly referring to Nancy as just Titian-haired or the Titian-haired teen. I knew the Renaissance artist Titian, but I didn't realize it also refers to reddish-brown hair. Still, it's an odd description to use so much. It feels like when a kid learns a new word and is trying to show it off by using it constantly. Anyways, the book's plot is incredibly different from the game. The basics are similar. One of Nancy's neighbors, this time called Mrs. Harwood instead of Mrs. Petrov, asked Nancy to check in on her daughter who married an English aristocrat named Hugh Penvillin and has been acting strange ever since. But that's about it. Less than half of the book even takes place at the manor. The vast majority of it is in London, where Nancy is living out her 2013 super Hulakian Anglophile fantasies. None of the Penvillin lore is here at all either, and there's no werewolf or secret cult of the members. The book mainly focuses on Nancy's romance with English rock star Lance Warwick, who is described as looking like an impish mixture of Mick Jagger, Billy Idol, and David Bowie. Oh yeah, good way to describe a character, just name 3 guys who are famous and hot. The cross-Atlantic romance is really the main thing this book is emphasizing. The book is really for any American girl who had visions of a hot British guy taking you to see all the sights of London in the most flirtatious way possible. Anyways, the book may not have werewolves or cults or magic, but you know what it does have? Lots of drugs. Nancy at one point has coke planted in her purse. Another character is completely strung out on heroin, and the main villains aren't trying to preserve the family secret, but are instead drug smugglers using the cave underneath the castle as their hideout. It's very bizarre. Also, Nancy is very, for lack of a better word, thirsty. In this book, she loved London, and right now it was an exciting source of trendy new fashions, new music, and new lifestyles. What kind of lifestyles are those, Nancy? Also, as I said, the rock star is pursuing her in the book, and she's very much into it. But Ned is still in the picture, though, which is weird. She makes it clear that Ned is her boyfriend, but at one point says, "We decided to date other people till we make up our minds." Sure, Nancy, whatever you have to tell yourself. Later, a local journalist in Cornwall falls for her, and the two boys fight over who gets her until they make up. Nancy can't choose between them, though. There's this scene that's oddly reminiscent of Challengers, where she makes out with one of them and then the other of them in front of them both, and everyone seems happy with the situation. I bet Edward Stratemeyer's vision was that one day Nancy would be in a polyamorous situationship with two British twinks. Anyways, the book is weird and also not very good, but at least it was fun to read. I mean, there were a lot of facts and tidbits about British witchcraft in Cornwall, which were cool to learn. Still, the influence on the game is threadbare. I feel like the designers just wanted to make a game where Nancy was in a gothic and isolated mansion in England and just took the basic details of the plot device and setting of the Bluebeard room to justify that vision. So many of the characters in the game aren't in the book. There's no Jane, and a gang of drug peddlers is the villain instead. Even the fact that they changed the character's name from Lisa to Linda in the game seems to have been done for no other reason but being slightly petty and trying to set the game apart from the book. In an interview with Robert Rydell, the main designer of Blackmoor, he seems to only have distaste for the book, which is a bit harsh. I mean, it's memorable for being bizarre if nothing else. How can you hate a book with a sentence like this? Sweat beaded his forehead as the music grew louder and his voice rose to a hoarse shout. At times, he seemed to be threatening or sneering at the audience. At others, cajoling or making love to it. These books were intended for girls aged 8 to 12, by the way. Now, in my videos, I talk a lot about the books or movies or art that inspired certain games. Often the things that inspired the games are unfortunately more compelling than the games themselves. I'm glad to say that for once, this is not the case here at all. The Curse of Blackmoor Manor is so much better than its source material. I found the story and background lore super compelling and the game genuinely scary. More than anything, it was extremely fun. Games should be fun. At least I think they should be. I was left feeling sad I never played this game when I was a kid, because even if I couldn't have beaten it, I know I would have loved it. But as a young boy, expressing interest in something that was even marginally designed for girls was social suicide. Which is a real shame, because child me would have loved this. Oh, and if I asked my parents, they definitely would have wanted me to play it. They'd much rather buy me this than Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, which I begged for months for. It's my fault and my fault alone. Well, maybe society's fault a little bit too. Anyways, I can't wait to play more Nancy Drew games. And after only one foray, I'm proud to say that I fancy Nancy. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time, dear viewer. I wish you all the good fortune in the world. I remain your faithful snuggler.